Welcome back to the J&J RC podcast, and today we are in a special location shooting live at Robbins Airfield, our home field in Sylmar, California. I'm Jason Shumway.
Hey everyone, I'm Julian Mello. Welcome to episode 3 of
three already?
The J&J RC podcast. Here at the end of the year celebration. We cannot fly today, typical Saturday, because of TFR.
Yeah. TFR and Santa Ana's today. So, and we'll get into a little bit of what a TFR is for those who don't know and are wondering how it affects our hobby and what that is now. But in California here, in Southern California, we have a thing called the Santa Ana's, which is very, very high winds that come in from the north usually. And today we are getting them good. I would say that we're getting a good 20, gusting 30 down here, and luckily we're in our little microcosm of a field where we have a big berm off to the side, cutaway, and that protects us a bit. But if you go up by the road there, it's a good solid 20 constant. It's pretty insane. So that definitely means no flying, at least for not planes we care about. But in addition to that,
yes,
holding this down.
Also, the president arrived yesterday at around 5 p.m. and he'll be departing Southern California tomorrow, Sunday. So there's no flying. There's no general aviation flying. That includes us, including us in our little silly toys, our RC hobby.
Yeah.
It's also part of the national airspace. So they issued a TFR that applies to everyone, including us. So here we are grounded, and we decided to maybe hit just a different aspect of the hobby. We're just gonna run our RC cars around the field,
Yep.
and maybe some kite stuff that we are allowed to. So that's gonna be our plan B for today.
So, I mean, kind of the way to look at it is like you can make the best of a bad situation. RC airplanes are our passion, but RC in general is always something that we love. So RC cars, after the holidays, it'll be RC tanks, because I've got ordered a couple of tanks, one to give to my son, and of course I had to get a matching one too, so we could battle. But you know, RC tanks, but I've got some 3D printed plans to make a Mars rover. And so, yeah, you know, there's a lot of fun things to do. So if you're grounded, you can be pissed about it, or you can make the best of a bad situation and come out and still have some fun. Plus, it's a good day to do some general field maintenance, and we've been building the benches that you see behind us. Those are new to the field, and we've got 2 more on the other end that we need to seal up and get going. So it'll be a fun day. But let's talk a little bit more about TFRs and kind of, you know, where they came from and stuff. And so there's always been flight restrictions that the FAA's put into place for different things, but after 9/11, presidential TFRs and stuff became a real thing, and this is now a 30 nautical mile circle centered on just outside of LAX that no aircraft are allowed to fly in unless they are on an approved IFR flight plan. So if they're talking to ATC, so like commercial flights are still flying, but general aviation, which we normally have quite a bit here, being that Whiteman's not too far from here, is completely shut down. And getting out, even on is possible in general aviation, but you have to fly out of the TFR. You can't do any training. You can't do any basic local flights. It's got to be I'm picking up an IFR plan or a flight plan, and I'm leaving the area. And then even then, you may not get approved for it. But the bigger thing is that with all of the changes in the FAA and how they respond to model aircraft and what we're doing there, they've included model aircraft into that. And I think part of it is the fear that a drone can carry something nefarious and attack the president or the VIP who is, you know, this, because you get the same VIP TFRs for the vice president, and you don't typically get it for members of Congress, though.
No.
But these are all things.
Let me interrupt you for a little bit, Jason, and let's define a little bit of these. One of the things about aviation is that it's full of acronyms. So what's a NOTAM?
NOTAM, Notice to Airmen.
Perfect. And those are usually issued by the FAA.
Yes.
And a way now that us modelers become aware of those is by checking the Before You Fly app and
Yeah.
I forget
Drone Zone on the
all those
FAA is a good
tools
one,
that you
too.
can check. Those are all telling people that today you're not allowed to fly. So for general aviation, you're calling your airport, you would get the NOTAMs. But for us RC people, we would have to check
Yeah.
our apps.
Well, it's
So-
also good to be a member of AMA. If you're a member of the AMA, then they send out an email blast alerting you to special airspace considerations and stuff like that. And that's one of the big things they've really picked up more on lately, which is excellent for us. And if you are into aviation and want some other side things, ForeFlight on the iPad is a navigation app for general aviation. Shows you airspace and all this stuff. If you do flight simming, then ForeFlight as a tool to flight sim with is just like using it in a real airplane, but it will also show you a depiction of the TFRs and where they are and when they're active and when they're not.
ForeFlight, a Boeing company.
You can also call flight services. There's a phone number that, if I'm smart enough here, I'm going to put it on the screen somewhere around here, that you can call, and you can use this to request weather reports and things just like any other pilot, but you can also get updates on NOTAMs and TFRs and things, and they will read these to you. These are also available on a web-based application. You can go to aviationweather.gov and get a lot of this information from there, including TFR maps and stuff like that. But going directly to the FAA website will also get you all this. So there's a lot of ways to get this information.
Another acronym there, TFR.
TFR, temporary flight restriction, that are not always temporary. Disney's had a TFR around it since 2013, I think is when, no, 2003, I mean, not 13, geez, 3. I think it was a couple years after 9/11 happened.
You cannot fly over Disneyland. They've requested that because they don't want, general aviation planes flying. You're in Star Wars land. You don't want to see like a little Cessna flying by. You're in Pixar world. You don't want to see a plane flying by. So that's another reason why they're doing it. Also,
I think a lot of it was they didn't want helicopters coming over and getting pictures and stuff, and they found a nice little loophole. Ironically,
and advertising too.
They wanted to do a drone show, and they were denied their drone show because of their TFR.
Oh wow!
Which I thought was kind of funny. I think they have worked out. It's gotten better that you can work out things with the FAA now too for TFRs. But in terms of model aircraft and recreational use, yeah, once the TFR is in, I mean, you have your choice to comply or not comply, and obviously we're all going to make our decision on that. But with the TFR, the non-compliance does come with some pretty serious federal punishment. You don't go to local jail now; you go to federal jail on that one. So.
And you will get a knock on your door by the Secret Service.
Yep.
And let's say it's March of next year, and this goes into our next topic, which is going to be remote ID. But let's say our planes are equipped with remote ID, and I decide to bust the TFR right now. Well, guess what? It's going to be, it's out there. My GPS of where the plane flew, the GPS of where I'm located is going to be out there. So there are potentially going to be consequences because, it's out there that you're flying with a remote, if you turn on your remote ID, obviously. But
well, yeah.
But yeah, those are the real consequences for GA pilots if they happen to bust, the TFR. They will get a knock on the door by the Secret Service. And yeah, the FAA is not going to be happy about that. And it might happen if in the future with the remote ID, someone decides to bust the TFR, you also might get a knock by the Secret Service. So, even if that's not the case, we want to keep, within the bounds of the law, keep the hobby healthy, even if we might not agree with, it becomes a whole discussion between like the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. But at this point, we, as a club, we notified our members as well via email about the extended TFRs. So that's another way you can be notified if you're part of a club. So our members were notified that flying is not allowed here at the field during the TFR. So that's another way of knowing.
Like you said, with the spirit of the law versus, the letter of the law. I'm a general aviation pilot also, and I actually one time, because TFRs, can also pop up, not just for presidential visits. Out here we have a lot of forest fires, and TFRs will pop up for forest fires to protect the the air units that are dropping water and stuff like that. It's kind of why a lot of this drone stuff has been happening, is because of guys who wanted to film the fires and caused aerial firefighters to not be able to do their job. But fun story is, I was flying out towards Bakersfield. I was heading up there to just do some landings, and a TFR popped up while I was in the air. So when I left, there was no TFRs, there was no indicators that I needed to avoid that area, but I'm flying along. Luckily, I kept myself on flight following, which meant I was talking to air traffic control the whole time. So I'm flying along, and air traffic control goes, I forget what airplane, 26 Fox probably. He goes, 26 Fox, are you aware there's a TFR now that you were just about to enter? And I'm like, what? And he's like, so he vectors me out, and I did end up flying into it just slightly, because by the time he told me I was already entering, I didn't get in any trouble for that. It wasn't, it was, so if a TFR pops up while you're at your morning flying field and you're not aware of it, chances are they're not going to throw the book at you. It's more for ones that are, in advance, like presidential TFR is a much more serious thing than if a TFR pops up, unexpectedly for a fire that's there. They want you to clear the area and stuff. So they have been very reasonable with their implementation of these and stuff like that. But it is a new thing for us to all be aware of, and to realize that we are now participating in the national airspace system, and that comes with certain responsibilities. So even though a lot of pilots want to tell us we're not real pilots, they're sure treating us more and more like real pilots,
Indeed, and that reminds me of another question that I had for Jason a couple of nights ago, and that was the whole 2 sticks of butter, 250-gram rule. And I was wondering if I could bring my DJI Mini, which happens to weigh 249 grams, and if I could fly it under 400 feet and not bust the TFR. But upon further reading and research, there is no under limit for the weight of a craft. So the TFR applies to everything at this point. Doesn't matter, if you get a 2-gram drone quad flying, you cannot fly that either. So it applies to everything at this point that is considered a drone by the FAA, which is everything. So there is no under limit. Under 55 pounds, I guess, is also the question there. So everything under 55 pounds is the legality there.
So, the normal 250, I don't have to have remote ID and stuff. It's still true, you don't have to have remote ID, but you're still not allowed to fly. So yeah, I mean, and we kind of, we started touching into the remote ID thing.
Yes, remote ID, the implementation of it got moved from, I believe, September of this year, and it'll start going into effect in March of next year.
Yeah, 6 months out. Well, I think, as I understand it, technically, it is in play now. The rule is now law, and you have to have remote ID on your thing. But they recognize that due to the chip shortage and silicon issues and getting things made, production supply and demand issues or whatever, that people weren't able to get a hold of the units. So they basically said, while it is in effect, and if you have your unit, you should be using it, they're not going to enforce it. There's no punishment. There goes our camera. We need a sandbag on the second camera, so. Wow, the winds are insane out here. So, okay, so while that isn't, while you should have your remote ID unit on your plane, even now, if you were to be caught without it, there's no enforcement action that's going to happen. But then in March, that enforcement action should be in play.
So let's do a quick little recap of what remote ID is. Remote ID is you basically need to get a little device on your flying machine that will report your GPS position of yourself and the craft. So you need initially it was told. We were told that the thing would cost $50 around that.
They're going to be no more than $50.
But now they're around $100. So the cost went double. So that's another reason why the enforcement got delayed another 6 months. So basically, RRC models are going to have ADSB.
No, it's not quite ADSB actually. And that was actually a big thing that the FAA wanted to be clear. It's not ADSB. That's a whole separate unit that uses ground receivers and all this other stuff. Ours is just a Bluetooth broadcast. That I guess in the original rule they wanted that to go to the internet and all this stuff, and people freaked out, rightfully so. But it is just Bluetooth. So airplanes cannot detect our drones in the air. Their ADSB receivers will not see us. The only thing that can see us are basically right now, as I understand it, the receivers are all cell phones with a program like Drone Scanner, or Drone Tag has its one, Flight Test has their own one, and it will receive that Bluetooth signal in this. So the idea is that local law enforcement will be able to use a cell phone to see if that drone is transmitting its remote ID like it should.
Local law enforcement, or your local Karen, as they're delightfully depicted in the media.
Yeah.
So the person who wants to, you're flying your quad, your drone somewhere, and this person is upset that you're spying or whatever, they're upset, and now they're going to be able to pull up an app, this so-called Karen, and they're going to be able to come find you, see who you are exactly, and then report you to the authorities, so that the cops can come in and bust you. So that's the other part of it.
That's the idea. There's a lot of people, though, who are bringing up the fact that this ability for the general public to be able to track you down, knowing that you could be running potentially thousands of dollars worth of remote control gear, is that an invasion of privacy? And the guys from like Race Day Quads and stuff took it to court and did not, unfortunately, win their case on that basis. But it really does, if you've been in this and you've been flying drones and you've had people come up and harass you, the fact that they can now hunt you down with the aid of the FAA is a little disconcerting to me. I'm not a huge fan of the implementation of remote ID as it is right now. I do think that I don't understand why the general public needs to be able to have that, and that that this information isn't encoded to a receiver that only law enforcement can have. I think that would be a much safer alternative that still achieves the goals of the FAA, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that how this is going to play out in the long run is, I think, of very much interest to me. I think how it's going to affect the hobby. When you listen to the guys like Bardwell talks about XJet talks a lot, and he's very, very vocal about how asinine he thinks this whole process is. There's been a few people who've also said, don't invest into a lot of, remote ID units, because they think that this whole system is just to show how it can't work, and so it's going to all end up going away in a couple of years. I don't know if I would put my bets on that and count on it. I think the FAA will work with a broken system much longer than most people would be willing to, but just because it's a system and they, don't really want to have to deal with it,
And that sort of is a great segue into our next topic, which is FRIAs, because basically we are supposed to, according to what a FRIA is.
Define FRIA.
FRIA is an area authorized FRIA.
Federally Recognized Identification Area.
Perfect. So it's a site like ours, technically, where we're allowed to fly, and you don't have to have remote ID, because we're a flying site, basically. But because of the regulations and all the paperwork and all the hazards and all the back and forth, we've been denied twice here at our field our FRIA status. We have an agreement with our tower here, the closest tower, so we are in the legal, but because of the bureaucracy, we've been denied this twice. So technically we shouldn't have to have a remote ID here at the field, and then the so-called, there's no reason for there to be Karens, because we are a field. So if someone has an issue with us, they can come down and talk to us. So that's the other infuriating part, is that if they're going to enforce it, they need to get the other part
it would be nice if
in
the
check,
FAA,
which is places like us, without having to have that requirement.
It would be nice if they had a little bit of logic. This field in particular has been here since the late 80s. Our Model Aviation Club has been running it for the last 3 years, but it's still been here for a long time. It's a known, location. With the agreement we have with Whiteman Tower that allows us to fly up to 400 feet, the fact that the FRIA teams at the FAA who are deciding this are going, well, you're in a zero fly area, so it's obviously very dangerous for you to fly there. And it's like, yes, but we've already worked that out, and we have for the last 3 decades, of time, is not being taken into consideration. And I think that kind of blind enforcement of these things without consideration to what the actual situation is not helping the FAA situation any more than it's helping ours. They're trying to promote safe flying. They want people to stop flying over neighborhoods, over fires, over police scenes, over the cities and stuff like that. So we say, okay, they tell us fly at clubs where it's defined. And so we have this club, beautiful runway and everything, and they go, sorry, that's not safe. That to me does not make sense in their logic. And I think it's an unfortunate thing because it would make their lives easier and it would promote people to go to places like this, designated fields that are designed for one purpose, and that is flying toy airplanes. But to deny the fields their spots makes no sense to me. At least not in the spirit of what they're trying to achieve within the safety aspect of this rule. And so, yeah, I mean, we're on our 3rd application, and it was, the second one was basically they denied us because, it's just not a safe area or whatever. They didn't, on the first one, they didn't know we had a letter of agreement with the tower. The second one, they felt that it was just not safe enough because once they established FRIA, then anyone can fly here. If we had some kind of access control to the field, then that would be different. So we sent it back again saying, we actually do have access control. You have to be a member and you have to have a code to the gate to get in. And now we've
an AMA member. Yeah.
And be an AMA member, and which is also meeting the requirement that you have to be part of a community-based organization. And the 3 CBOs right now are AMA, FPV
Coalition?
FPV Freedom Coalition, and Flight Test has their own CBO. And the 3 of those, are all having problems getting their fields that have been established for years approved. That is the one thing I wish the FAA would take into better consideration, because I think a lot of people would be much more prone to be compliant if their local field wasn't being denied for very silly reasons. I mean, when you look at like the Apollo Basin, which is down here in Van Nuys, it's a field that's been around for 75 years, has never had a problem, has always worked well with Van Nuys, but they are on the approach path to runway, 330?
They're right there.
Something.
They're right there.
It is. The planes come in
And the
very
flight
low.
path.
When the winds are reversed, it could be problematic. There's a potential there for planes to come into close proximity to RC. I understand that being closer looked at, but I don't feel like the FAA is actually looking closely at these as much as they've got, 4 or 5 people over in Washington that are going, well, paper says this, sorry. I think this has to have a little bit more like consideration for the actual situations these fields are in,
Okay, so I heard something that I believe is wrong. It's absolutely wrong, and everyone should not do this because it is wrong. But there are ways to just broadcast. If you were to sabotage, if you were not to like the system, you could sabotage it. You could just start broadcasting junk here because it's not technically illegal to do so. You could just broadcast a bunch of nonsense. There are apps that will do that since it's a Bluetooth signal, and you could just jam this. Now,
Yeah,
if this was on the malicious intent. Now, let me just switch this over to the other side, which is maybe giving it a bit of a positive spin. I know we've been talking a lot of smack about the Federal Aviation Administration, but on a positive spin, they have been working on improving their stance on pilots' mental health. And they are convening early next year in Washington to do something about their zero policy on mental health issues that pilots face in the FAA. You know, that goes along with some issues with alcoholism and stuff like that. But so I'm glad they are, you know, focusing, you know, on the mental health issues, and sort of that's the reason why they're not focusing on us in our little toy hobby.
Yeah.
So that's my sort of positive spin on this situation, on our beloved Federal Aviation Administration.
I do think that the FAA has a very large job to do, and it's an important job. You know, being able to travel and move, you know, via air travel is huge in this country. I mean, the thought of having to drive 3 days to get across the country or something every time we want to go somewhere, I mean, really limiting.
Air traffic controllers right now, they are overworked,
underpaid, overstressed,
and there have been a couple of incidents where, like near incidents within, you know, full-scale planes almost hitting each other because lack of ATC. You know, there's not enough you know, people that are willing to do this job, because it's one of those things where you have to get in early in your career. That's another issue that the FAA is facing. There's a literal lack of controllers. There's also a literal lack of pilots in the industry. They've lowered like the requirements for all the airlines. So there's a lot of, so basically what I'm getting at, there's a lot of things, lots of things on the FAA's plate, and perhaps our you know, our silly little toy drones here that, you know, might be able to strap some kablooey stuff onto something and inflict some damage is probably on their lower end of the priority list.
I think the thing is it's not that we don't have love for the FAA. I mean, the FAA, like any other, you know, regulatory commission, of course people are not going to be happy about being told that what they can and can't do. You know, there's plenty of people who would love to fly their airplane under bridges and things like that because it's cool, right? But there's good reasons for a lot of these rules and stuff. I think all we want is to see the FAA work with the recreational RC community a little bit more, and not just the commercial drone industry. It's like, yes, we understand that 90% of these rules are because they want drone delivery, they want drone, you know, autonomous drone things out in the world, and how that interfaces is very important, and it's a big world. But I think there's some compromise that can be given here, and we don't hate the FAA. You know, like I said, I'm a pilot myself. I've enjoyed very much interfacing with the FAA and getting my different licenses and ratings and things like that. But I think with the shortage of pilots and things, stuff like RC brings people into aviation, brings them into that level or that part of the industry. And if you start taking all those away and making it so difficult that these kids don't want to get into it, we're going to see this dry up. And then how do you inspire people to get into aviation if you don't give them the toys to play with first? And that's what these are. I mean, yes, they can be dangerous, but they are still ultimately toys. You know?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that some people in this hobby have been accused of, and that's gatekeeping. You know, the whole perception that, you know, you would go to the field, cranky old man, they want you to file this stuff. And now it seems like the FAA is sort of being the gatekeeper here, you know, and that's what we don't want. We want the opposite, as you mentioned. We want the FAA to encourage people to use the federal airspace for generally, not just for, you know, big airplanes, but for also our little stuff. And as you mentioned, drone delivery and more automated stuff, and all of these things are going to start polluting the airspace in the future. They're going to have to control and manage and regulate and somehow prevent, you know, kablooies from happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, making everything safe. You know, you want these drone deliveries to happen 10 years from now. You want, you know, to order your Chipotle and have it delivered via drone.
We could get pizza here at the field finally.
Yeah, imagine that. You know, but not today because of a TFR.
Yeah.
We would have to get a regular old motorcycle guy coming down here to have the field delivered.
Yeah. What about those drone robots that, you know, have you seen the rovers?
Oh yeah,
in
the
San
delivery
Francisco?
robots. Yeah,
Those things just driving around.
Yeah.
It's hysterical, man. I hear they keep getting robbed though.
People are like walking around and just kicking them. They don't care about those.
Well, let's bring this whole thing around. Well, real quick, a quick plug for the field. If you are interested in RC and you're not already a member here, but you kind of want to come out, or maybe you've got a kid who's very interested, you know, our Model Aviation Club here in Sylmar and at Robbins Field here is one of the most friendly fields that you're ever going to find. We have a lot of good guys down here, and we accept everything and everybody. to come down here and learn about the hobby. But we're also very accepting of drones, you know, of helicopters, of things a lot of the other fields sometimes don't want around because they, you know, they find them annoying or whatever. They think they're ruining the hobby as it goes. But here we really want to push forward the entire hobby. So if you want to learn to fly drones, great. You want to learn to fly helicopters, great. Gliders, twin engine, single engine, EDF, you name it. You want to put a motor on a paper airplane. I saw that the other day, which is technically still banned by the TFR. I just want to point out.
Yep.
You can do that, and that's what we do here. So
And we have 2 licensed instructors.
yes, AMA actually licenses their instructors, introductory pilots. And so we are both, the 2 of us are both introductory pilots. We'd love to teach you to fly and get you out here. So, time is starting to run out.
Alrighty.
We have a gel blaster off to the side to keep us on time
Our
today.
EP here is aggressive, but we told him, and that is our sign to STFU. It's time to wrap up.
Okay, we're talking about our last topic here real quick and leave on a fun note. So rather than talk about the depressingness of regulations and rules and all this other stuff, let's talk about a new way to build a model airplane. And this is, in my opinion, moving away from our foam built, everything you get is already done, back to actually building. And oh, Jesus Christ. And that is the 3D. Okay, we're gonna have to.
We need about 5 more minutes, Pat. We got another topic.
So I want to bring up 3D printed airplanes, and that is, I think, a new part of the hobby. And we're seeing so many more designs and stuff, but it takes us back to what it was like to build stick and tissue airplanes again. You know, where you actually have to glue things together. You get to paint. You get to do all this stuff. But recently, I built a Eclipse Cobra, which is a 50 millimeter EDF, and it is just such a fun plane to get into, but it's a whole new part of the hobby. And Julian here, he's an expert 3D guy. So how would you get into it if you want to start into 3D airplanes?
Let me wind it a bit back. And this whole thing with 3D printing, yeah, it's happened sort of in stages. So 3D printing's, you know, your home 3D printing's been around for about 10 years. I did this about 10 years ago, and you would print with PLA, but PLA is too heavy, realistically, for planes. So planes were very piggy-like, and heavy planes do not fly very well because of the wing loading. So then we had a revolution about, I don't know, 5 years ago, where they introduced a new material called LWPLA, which is a material that you print at half the density, because as you print, it expands. So you use half the material. Now planes are half as light, but just as strong. And then another revolution happened, which are these new printers that are just, you come out of the box and you just plug them in, which allow people to print. So now what I would recommend is, yeah, get yourself a 3D printer. Nowadays you can get anything from an Ender 3, a cheap Ender 3, to something a little more premium, like a Bamboo, either a P1 or a Carbon. And the magical ingredient in all this is the LWPLA, yes, which at first seems a little more expensive because each spool is about $40, which is double what a regular spool costs. But you use half of it as you print, so it lasts twice as long. So, you know, a spool can easily last you 2 or 3 or 4 planes.
Yeah. It's amazing how much you can get out of them. I've gotten 2 Cobras and I'm not even halfway through a reel yet.
And another question that we get constantly is, how long does it take to print? So on average, I'm going to say it takes about 2 or 3 days to print a plane. So, yeah, you know, between flying sessions, you can print 2 planes, basically. And let's say you crash one, then you just print another piece of it or another whole part of it. Or you can do what I just recently did, and is with this Cobra, the 50 mil. I scaled it 140%, and I'm going to stick a 70 mil EDF in there. So that's another cool thing you can do. You can start experimenting. There's another plane that I found, an Aero Commander 500,
yeah,
and I've scaled that one down to 60% because I want more of a park flyer size. And eventually I'll scale it up to 150% to make it a lot bigger, sort of the Twin Otter size that we have right now. So there's a lot of experimentation, and another key thing that you need to keep in mind when you're printing with LWPLA is to print in vase mode. Now, the most advanced planes like the Cobras from Eclipson, they're designed to minimize retractions, because every time you have a retraction with the 3D print, the foam keeps oozing out, the filament, because it's always foaming. So you need to cancel that, the retraction. So that's one of those things that you need to set up on the printing. But it allows you to remix and design and make a bunch of different things at home. As Jason mentioned, it's a new dimension of the hobby that is great.
So I got into the 3D printing side of this a while back, but when I got into the planes, was initially discovering the Eclipson planes. And Eclipson has some really neat designs, and they print really well. Hopefully you can throw some links into the caption or whatever we have where we're posting this. That's a great one. I've also got some planes from a company called Titan Dynamics, and they're really good. So those are two you can start with, but if you just search for 3D planes, you can find them on Cults 3D, Thingiverse, Printables, all of these. There's a lot of places that have posted them up.
Yeah, RC Groups has a whole forum with a list of like the latest 3D printed planes as well.
So and maybe on the next episode, we'll bring some of those planes that we've printed and stuff, and get some videos and kind of show what it is, because going back into that, working with the pieces, gluing them together and building again, it's brought back the part of the hobby that I really loved when I started. My first plane was a Goldberg Eagle 2, which was a trainer, all built out of balsa and ply, and glued it all together. That plane still sits in my shop. It is just, when you building something yourself, there's a certain satisfaction to see it in the air. And I got that again with the 3D printed. And even after a crash, my first Cobra, I was testing the stall limits and I found it. And once you stall it, it spun, and it spun all the way into the ground. And I will say, 3D printed planes, when they break,
oh, it's spectacular.
Oh my God, yeah, it's epic. It's no confetti. It's awesome, and it's kind of fun. But knowing that I can print another one for like a whole whopping like $4 in filament or $5 is pretty awesome. I mean, and it's a neat part of the hobby. But we'll expand on this more, and we'll keep going into it, in future episodes and stuff. And we can talk maybe some more about some specific planes. And if you guys have any questions about it, load us up in the comments. Let us know what you want to know and what you want to hear, and we'd love to bring those things up.
Yes, also send us an email. Feedback at jandjrcshow.com, also for those email comments. Leave a comment on YouTube. Leave a comment anywhere you hear this, you see this. Let us know how we're doing, and we will come up with episode 4 soon in the new year, 2024.
And and hit our links. Go to ourmodelaviation.club and find out about our club here in Similar. If you're in California, come out and fly with us. And we'll get you going in the hobby. This is a great hobby to be into, because it's so much more than just flying toy airplanes. There's building and this, and hell, you get to learn about airspace and government regulations on top of it all.
And acronyms. It's all acronyms. And Pat is getting ready that gun. Stop it, Pat. Stop.